Good morning, Ben.
Morning, how you doing?
Morning. Well, listen, we're in sunny Edgbaston, part of Birmingham, and Ben, you run Dr. Finlays. You're a founder and owner of Dr. Finlays. Dr. Finlays, as by the name tells you, it's a medical practice. We've known each other for a while because you do a fantastic contribution for our magazine, the Business Influencer magazine, and we thought it'd be quite good to capture your thoughts on podcast.
Thank you.
Both visually and, of course, from an audio perspective. You have 3 outlets, 3 clinics. We're sitting in the Birmingham one.
That's right.
You have one in Leeds, and you have one down in London. And we got to know each other well because you have an insight into how people don't take their health clearly very seriously. You have a fantastic podcast which I've been on, which is Health versus Wealth. And I thought would capture some of those insights as to what you think and how you suggest and recommend people look after their bodies and their health. But let me first start with, you're a qualified doctor. You've ended up running a business. Now, most doctors, the perception is they're doing all right for themselves, nice income. Why would you suddenly decide to go down the entrepreneurial approach and set your own practice up? What made you think that was the right thing to do? Are you from an entrepreneurial background, or what is it? What prompted you?
Great question. First of all, so great to be here with you. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
And it's great to be in the Business Influencer magazine. I really love writing for this high quality publication. So the answer to your question, I became frustrated with not being able to deliver high quality healthcare and having enough time as an NHS GP. And I've always been a bit, right, if it's change it, be the change you want to see. I tried to change things on the inside as a GP, and I couldn't do that enough in a GP practice. So I just thought, I'm going to have to do this on my own. So I initially took a job in York, and we set up the first private GP practice in York in 2015. And then for family reasons, moved down to Birmingham in 2018.
Good decision.
Good decision. I love Birmingham. And it's so convenient for the whole country. We aim to be across the whole country. So so I set it up really to look after busy working people, because they were the people who kept coming to me as a GP, and I wasn't able to deliver in 10 minutes what they needed to protect their health in order to grow their wealth. And so the emphasis of Dr. Finlay's private practice is basically looking after people to say, look, you're investing so much in your life and your business, you need that support team behind you to invest in your health to sustain this. Otherwise, there's no point in dying at 45 of a heart attack, having amassed great wealth and success. You've got to have the longevity with it.
But the dive from being a GP into setting your own enterprise, I mean, that's not easy. I mean, that's a huge risk, because you're going to have to build a client base, overheads and people and clinicians. How easy was that transition from being dependent
Good question.
on an income and suddenly having to fend for yourself? Was that easy? Because most doctors don't do that.
Yeah, I think I've always been a slight risk taker, and I've done things like, join the Territorial Army. I've travelled extensively in Africa and Asia. I've done some pretty hairy things. I don't really have a sense of fear. So I think what that means is that I'm willing to try anything if it's going to produce some good results and what I want to see. So I also had a little bit of a buffer because I worked part-time whilst doing this in prison.
Got it.
In order to establish myself. I've got a family, I have to feed them. My wife was on maternity leave. So I was basically going, okay, I'm going to do 2-3 days a week in prison and start venturing into the private sector. And that started with a couple of talks in Leeds for the business community. It resulted in me then serving PwC and looking after some of the high-end entrepreneurs there. And then it grew to expanding, basically to a full-time role, which is what you see now, which I've been doing since 2022. So it was actually a gradual. I was very fortunate to be able to gradually get into it and sort of slightly de-risk it. I mean, everyone was going, "What are you doing leaving the NHS? What about your pension?"
That's right.
And I was just saying, "Look, you only live once. I don't want to just, live for retirement. I want to live for now, and I want to live the way I want to live. I want to see my family. I want to have enough money to look after them, and I want to help people. And I couldn't do that in my current form in the NHS GP world.
To take that leap into self-employment and then running a business, had you seen that before? So your parents, did you say your dad was an accountant? And
yeah, so my dad...
Did that help?
Yeah, Dad was always quite entrepreneurial. He trained as an accountant with KPMG in the city in London.
Okay.
And they went off to Kenya and did a 3-year secondment there. He then came back and actually gave up accountancy and ran a conference centre, which I grew up in. So I was I think I was quite sociable from an early age, but also I saw him making things happen. We used to have an interest in classic cars, and we used to buy and sell these classic cars and do them up. So that he was good at making deals. I picked up some of that. He's Scottish. I'm mostly Scottish. So again, there was this kind of drive for, that's interesting. And at university, we bought a house and I rented that out. And, so I began to get into the flow of business, and there's nothing like just doing it to learn stuff, right? And when I cringe when I think of my first forays into business, not knowing how to negotiate. No one ever taught you that at med school, and they still don't, and they really need to, because private practice is booming, and people need these negotiating skills as part of their career. The people who get ahead in medicine are the ones who've got a full package, not just good doctor, not just academic. And I was never the brightest at med school. I actually failed a year and had to retake it. I failed my A-levels, never had to take them. But I think that taught me a bit of resilience, and actually to kind of broaden it out a bit and say, well, look, what am I good at? Well, I'm all right talking, I'm comfortable in front of a crowd, so let's play to those strengths. And that kind of led into this sort of bigger role.
Well, it's interesting, you talk about communication skills, and by the way, I'm not going to paint a general picture, but accountants, lawyers, doctors and people in the professions aren't the greatest communicators around. And I think you're absolutely right. If as an entrepreneur you can develop good communication skills, particularly when you're leading a team and building a vision in, then that does play a role. So I'm not surprised that the people who tend to get to the top tend to be great communicators. And of course, I was going to say art of the deal, the negotiations, but we won't go there now. So you saw a need where, and I love the way you said it, where 10 minutes wasn't sufficient to help someone. So you knew that if you set something up and gave people more than 10 minutes, you could impact their lives.
Exactly.
So during the years, and we'll now go into advice for people on whether. So during those years, what are the worst habits people have that you can strike quite quickly?
Yeah.
And then we'll pick some questions. So in those days, typically when people sit in front of you, how do you categorize them, and what are the simple solutions to some of the most obvious stuff, if that makes sense?
Yeah, great question. We're an integrated functional practice, so we look at the whole person, not just the symptoms they're presented with, not just, I've got an achy knee, or I'm having headaches, or I'm overweight. So we step back and go, right, how's your work-life balance? And we look at this holistic model, which I kind of came up with at med school. So it's the biopsychosocial spiritual model. So we're not ignoring any part of their health, and all those parts of their health intertwine. They balance out. If you can get a good balance of those parts, you're more likely to be healthy, well, successful, enjoying life. If there's an imbalance in that, when we interview someone in an initial consultation, we may find that they've got a real imbalance in one part of their life. So, big problem, workaholism, let's say. People basically going, I'm just going for the money, I'm just going for the success. They just think that that's what it's about. Now, a lot of people will get there and find that as an empty promise. And actually they get to the end of their life, or even they've made it, and they feel really disappointed and let down, and they're like, where's my life? I've got a black hole, I'm divorced, my kids don't know me, I've got no friends, I've just got lots of money, and that's not a fun place to be. So you've got to balance that. So we talk about the social area, balancing relationships with work, with the environment, and with your key people, your loved ones, your family. No one else can be a husband to your wife, or a father to your children, or a son to your parents, or a brother to your sisters. So that's what you've got to be, and you've got to do the other stuff as well.
So what do you look for? I'm sitting in front of you. I don't feel very well. Where do you start? Do you start looking at lifestyle first, and then, or do you look at the symptoms and then think, that indicates?
So typically people come to the doctor with symptoms, right? We tend to do a lot more with screening, which isn't saying I've got something wrong. It's saying I don't think I've got anything wrong, but I want to be optimised. I want to be better. Okay. So we also deal with very sick people as well, but we do a holistic assessment at the beginning, and the beauty of time is I can sit here and the first half hour I will just chat to you, find out what you're about, ask a few open questions, find out what's going on in your life. What are your biggest challenges? What are your hopes and dreams? What are you enjoying about life? What would you change if you could? What health problems or concerns have you got? Did your dad die of a heart attack age 50 and you're 45 and you're thinking, I've got 5 years left? What can we do about that? We then work out what your agenda is. In the background, my medical agenda is wearing away, a bit like Terminator. I've got this readout on my system going, he's a bit overweight, he's got a bit of a limp, looks like his skin's not so good, his eyes aren't bright, he's not got that spark, or no, he's way over the top, he's kind of so hyper, he's drinking too much coffee. So all that kind of figures in it, and then we come up with this action plan, which then plays out over a year, which will go, right, next 3 months, I want you to think about these foundational principles. Let's get the foundations right, and maybe a few tests to identify if there's any other concerns underneath. Then we'll come back, we'll trial something, we'll see if that's working, we'll see how that lands, and we'll support the person through. Let's suppose they're a bit overweight, and one of the obvious things is diet, but actually the big thing about weight is sleep. People do not realise that sleep is one of the biggest factors in weight gain.
Well, I've got a quote here.
Yeah.
So let's go into that.
Let's go. Yeah.
So, if you're an entrepreneur, and the Americans really push this, they say, sleep is for losers.
Yeah.
That's what they say. So if you're an entrepreneur, listen, you got to hack every hour. You got to make every hour work. For God's sake, don't go to sleep.
Yeah.
And you'll see many will boast, I can survive on 3 hours and 4 hours.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. So I suppose the question I've got for you is, if you're an entrepreneur, sleep is for losers. You're saying, absolutely not. Sleep are for the winners.
Absolutely.
And if so, could you maybe explain why sleep is so important?
Completely. I'll give you a quote. You see a lot of overweight millionaires.
Yes.
But you don't see a lot of overweight billionaires. Why is that?
Interesting.
Okay. That's because the billionaires haven't just grafted to get their success. They've actually overcome all aspects of life. Okay? So they've actually got the full package, and that's why they're ultra successful, not just moderately successful. So anyone can become a millionaire if they're given the right circumstances, they work hard, but it's not just about hard work and graft. Your quote earlier was about, sleep's for losers, and I can survive
That's
on
right.
4 hours.
I'm a warrior.
Do you want to thrive or do you want to survive? Most people are just surviving. They don't realise they can actually thrive. And to thrive, your body needs appropriate amounts of sleep. Now, that's different for everybody. Churchill used to sleep 4 hours and then sleep another 2 in the afternoon. So did Maggie Thatcher. People like Richard Branson have ADHD, they need less sleep, okay? But you've got to work out how much sleep you need, because if you don't get enough, what happens is your body produces a stress hormone, cortisol, and cortisol suppresses your immune system over time, increases fat deposition, increases your risk of cancer, increases your risk of any inflammatory condition, and basically will prematurely age you if you have too much cortisol for too long. So you don't want to have chronic sleep deprivation, because in all the studies, it's not good for you. We need to balance our needs. Now, you can pull an all-nighter when you have to. I'm not saying go to bed at 8 o'clock every night and be a boring, stay at home. What I'm saying is, if you've got to work all night, do it. But then the next day, go for a run, have a nap, get into bed early to catch up. And monitor your sleep. I use this Oura Ring. It monitors everything I do. It gives me a sleep score, and that gives you, it's not just about hours in bed. How many of those hours are you actually getting
Sleeping.
Quality sleep?
Yeah.
And is it deep sleep? Are you getting enough REM sleep, where your brain reorganises itself and recovers? That's dream sleep, and that only happens when you go in and out of light sleep to deep sleep.
So you dream only when you're not sleeping deep?
When you're going in and out of deep sleep. Okay, so, and that dream sleep is highly effective for recovery.
Okay.
That's why often if you're a bit stressed, you have these very, irritable dreams where you can't do something. Your body's trying to get in and out of deep sleep, but you're not getting enough. And you keep bumping back into light sleep where you wake up again and you're thinking of things. So your body's waking you up with a subconscious stress. So there's so many, sleep is one of the things we work on the most with entrepreneurs, right? The SAS and the Navy SEALs have this phrase, pain is weakness leaving the body. I think that's true if you're fit, okay? So if you're fit and you're really healthy, yes, you can endure some pain. But actually, if you have pain, it's a signal to say there's something wrong with you, and your body's telling you there's something wrong with you. You should acknowledge that signal and do something with it. And sleep is the same. If you're chronically tired, there's a reason for that. Either your lifestyle isn't fitting with your needs and your delivery, and you'll lose productivity, or there's actually a health problem stopping you sleeping. And one of the big things, you asked, what's the big pitfalls for entrepreneurs, is screens. They're so available.
Yeah.
Here I have a supercomputer in my pocket that's way better than the Sinclair Spectrum, ZX Spectrum I had when I was a kid. Does everything in a tiny thing that I can hold in my hand. The problem is it demands my attention. It's got addictive programs, and I keep looking at it. And if I keep looking at that before I go to bed, it's stimulating my brain into thinking more, it's stimulating into wakefulness, it's emitting blue light and electromagnetic forces that are not good for you.
So two things then. Just picking that up, and I've got another question. So if looking at the screen is not good for you before going to sleep,
Absolutely.
how long should you leave it before you put the screen down and then go to sleep?
Actually, for optimum sleep, 2 to 3 hours with no screens.
No!
Yep.
2 to 3 hours. So
Now
if
you
you're going
can-
to sleep at 8 then, or not, let's say 9 o'clock.
You can try and hack it. You can try and hack it.
So effectively 6 o'clock, put the phone down.
Basically, and you should put it away from you. You should actually have this at least the meter away from your bed. You shouldn't have this next to your head when you're sleeping. Okay, because it emits electromagnetic radiation. It's not good for you. And unfortunately, some brands of phones are a lot worse than that in terms of emitting them. The more popular ones, sadly, are worse. So my advice is put phones away, out of the bedroom. It's going to damage your love life if you sat there on your telephone anyway. But also, it's not going to give you sleep. And the other thing you can kind of hack is you can get blue blocking glasses that cut out blue light. Now, blue light is wakefulness. Blue light wakes you up. Blue light stimulates your brain. It's what the sunshine gives you. Screens give you an artificial blue light that's really unhelpful for stimulating your brain. So you need to have that cut out. Put your phone on a dim setting, on a nighttime setting if you have to at night. But also you can wear blue blocking glasses to help you wind down. And red light in the evening also helps your brain calm down and begin to settle. So light frequencies are really important in terms of balancing out these things as well. They can give you an edge. But ultimately, it's the brain activity that this demands. Your email is always there. It used to be you'd have to go in and start writing it down on paper in your office.
I'm guilty.
It's there.
I'm
So
guilty.
put it away, Linda. You'll sleep
guilty.
better.
I'm guilty. Now, you mentioned, and I've always heard this term, this power nap. A power nap in the afternoon.
I love a power nap.
Some people say highly recommend. Other people say, trouble is if you have a power nap, say for half an hour, 45 minutes in the afternoon, it knocks off the ability to sleep later on in the evening because you've had, which is true.
Yeah, good question. Again, it depends on your sort of your makeup. Some people will benefit from a power nap. The later you have a power nap, and the longer it is, the more likely it is to impact your sleep in the evening. So my advice is if you're going to have a power nap, have it as early as you can, ideally straight after lunch when you maybe have a bit of a slump, because that then gives you a bit of a refresh. Your body's actually digesting if you're having lunch. Don't have a big lunch, but actually the heaviest meal of the day probably should be lunch meal, not evening meal.
That should be heaviest.
Yeah. So if you're going to do that, you might feel a little bit slow as your blood all goes to your tummy and digests the food and gives you good nutrition. It comes away from your brain. That's why you feel sluggish and tired. So at that point, if you sleep, you'll digest better, rest and digest, and then you'll wake up feeling a bit more refreshed. So there's nothing wrong with a short power nap. We shouldn't be napping more than about 45 minutes. Otherwise we start getting into deep sleep and it's hard to get out of that and you feel groggy when you wake up. So tell yourself, I'm going to sleep for half an hour, set an alarm for half an hour. Your brain will wake you up again. and actually you'll be ready and you won't go into too much deep sleep. It's all about priming this machine up here.
Now, you spoke about having potentially your lunch being your heavy meal. So where does breakfast fit into this? And my final question linked onto it is, this is current fad, intermittent fasting, where your last meal and your next meal, I think it's 16 hours or thereabouts. So I'm trying to work this out now. So normal is breakfast, lunch, supper.
Sure.
That's normally the way it works.
Well, that's traditional British, isn't it?
That's the way it works. So now you're telling me, actually your heavy meal should be lunch, potentially followed by a power nap. So my question is, where does that place the breakfast?
Yep.
And if your lunch is your heavy meal, where does that place the evening meal in terms of what you eat? And is that following the intermittent 16 hours gap? I don't know. Listen.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
I see this all everywhere. So which is the best way forward in terms of diet and eating?
It's a great question. And I like, on the podcast, we're always interviewing people about what the habits are.
Yeah.
All right. Now, a lot of people, they feel embarrassed when I go, what did you have for breakfast?
Yeah.
Because they go, I didn't have any breakfast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is that deliberate, or do you just not like breakfast? And a lot of them will go, oh, I'm intermittent fasting, or I don't eat breakfast. Now, there's nothing wrong with not eating breakfast if your tummy isn't ready to receive food because you're getting up early, or you are choosing not to eat breakfast because you're extending your fast. And they call it break fast.
That's right.
Because you're breaking your fast overnight. Your body's fasting overnight for 8, 10, 12 hours.
Yes.
If you extend that and you then have lunch, or you just have one meal a day in the evening, then your body's in this fasting state. Now, what are the advantages of fasting? Michael Mosley wrote this great book called The Blood Sugar Diet, and I'm really sad to hear he passed away because he was one of my heroes, and his podcast is what we base our podcast on.
Yeah.
But he basically was talking about the benefits of fasting, and there's various different ways to do that. But essentially, if you're not eating carbohydrates, then you go into this state called ketosis, where you're burning fat. Now, if you burn fat, you're actually burning, first of all, the fat you've eaten, and then you're burning your fat stores. Fat stores burn really cleanly, okay? So actually, your brain lives off the product of fat stores, which is called ketones, and your brain actually loves to use ketones as an energy source. It's really clean, and it gives you very little side effects. It's very consistent. So sugar can be used by the brain, but it's less effective, and you get slumps. So actually, ketones are one of the best things to fuel your body with. The other advantage of fasting, if you've got this ketones being produced, is that you have very consistent energy. So you don't have this boom-bust thing, and you don't have to eat because you're using up your own stores. So, to give you an example, I once climbed a mountain with a group of guys, and we fasted for 40 hours, and we climbed the mountain, and we tested ourselves on the way to see what our energy was.
40 hours?
Yeah. And
almost 2 days.
So we started off, didn't eat anything from the Friday morning, climbed the mountain on the sort of Saturday early morning, and summited sort of at dawn and came down again, and then carried on the fast through till Sunday. And I lost 1 kilo of fat doing it, pure fat, because I measured myself before and after, and my ketones shot up to like 5.2, which is really high. But I felt absolutely great because you're burning really clean energy.
But didn't you feel hungry? And sorry, before you answer that question, they say you've got to eat to keep the energy going. So how did you?
Or you fill yourself. Now, I wouldn't recommend you do this without careful supervision. First of all, it's you've got to do this wisely. So, because I'm a doctor, I've trained in this, I know how to do it. So we were advising people on how to do this. You've got to keep drinking water.
Okay.
If you're fasting, because you don't want to dry up, and it takes a molecule of water to break every molecule of fat open to produce the energy. So you need more water. Otherwise, you get dehydrated and your kidneys can pack up and stuff. So please don't try that at home without water. But you either eat to fuel yourself, or you fuel yourself using your stores. Now, people who've walked across deserts or have done endurance marathons, that kind of thing, we know they can go for hours and hours without eating. Your body gets into this ketosis state and it uses those reserves. We were designed as human beings to do endurance marathons chasing after mammoths for days.
I was going to say, so is this a Western thing that we introduced 3 meals at a set? Because as you said,
it's quite a Western phenomenon.
Early days, you fed whatever you ate.
Yeah, and a lot of countries don't eat every 3 times a day. They might just eat 1 meal in the evening. When I was living in Africa, the kids there, they wouldn't eat any breakfast, and they'd just eat 1 meal in the evening. Or in other countries, when Ramadan happens, you're fasting all day.
Well, it's interesting. So when we, I've done my stint as a musician. So when we toured Europe and we got to Italy, remember we're used to breakfast, lunch, evening meal.
Yeah.
And then we went down the stairs in this hotel. And we said, breakfast. They said, we don't do breakfast.
You just have black coffee or something.
You have black coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
And we couldn't get our heads around, because as British we were used to having
full English, yeah.
And I remember we did this for a couple of days, and then there's almost mutiny in the band. They're saying we cannot, we want breakfast, and then we had to talk to the promoter and say, look, going forward, next tour, but for the next date, can we arrange hotel? So it's interesting, isn't it?
You've got to adapt though, and actually my time in the TA taught me that you can go way further than you think you can. Because we did a survival exercise on Dartmoor, and we had 1 day's food for 3 days exercise, and we basically had to survive on that. And I actually found that we had a supply of water, but I actually found that I could go further and faster and felt better when I wasn't eating.
So here's the strange thing then. Everything you've talked about so far, which is habits, is about mindset. So in other words, getting the mind tuned to eating at a particular time, sleeping at a particular time, habits, and mindset. So the interesting thing is you have entrepreneurs who have strong mindsets, resilience to get to where they have, but they're the ones who apparently don't have the mindset for that type of thing, and that brings them to you.
Exactly.
And because you see, they've got the mindset right for the business, but they haven't got the habits right for the health side. So my question for you then, why is that? Why do they place health behind wealth? What does that go back to? Is it family? Is it school? Is it general media where nobody talks? So what brings these people sitting in front of you that they all get the mindset right for the wealth bit, but not the mindset right for the health bit?
It's a really great question. I think in Britain there's a cultural thing post-war.
Okay.
Where in the war we didn't have much, you sucked it up, you just did your job, grafting, okay? And that's what we respect, is just get grafting, okay? You put your needs aside and you just deliver what you're supposed to do. The whole NHS concept is based on that for staff, basically putting your own needs aside and serving the population. The problem with that is you put your own needs aside, and that's why I left the NHS, because they weren't serving my needs, they weren't serving the needs of staff, they were chewing people up and spitting them out the other end. People were getting ill, sick. I had a friend who got a severe pneumonia, another friend committed suicide, I had various other people, and I thought, I don't want to end up like these guys. I need to do this sustainably. I've got to do it another way in my own control. So I think in Britain we have this very strong work ethic amongst business people and entrepreneurs. The sad thing is that it's not matched by a support ethic. We somehow have this concept that we can just go it alone. The concept of the self-made man is utter rubbish. There is no self-made man. Every man has been backed up by hundreds of people on his journey towards success, including their family, their parents, school, the government, everything. So actually,
they say it takes a village or something.
Exactly.
It takes a village.
So, but I think we still believe in this self-made man thing. I can do it on my own. Actually, I guess the concept I've brought in is from triathlon, where I used to do triathlon, and you need a full support team to make a successful triathlon. You're doing crazy amounts of exercise. You're probably going to get injured during the training, or you're delivering an intense amount of energy over a very short period of time. And you need a physio, you need a podiatrist, you need a nutritionist, you need a mindset coach, you need a family who are going to back you up. And it's not just about the mindset, it's not just about doing the thing, it's not just about doing the training. If you don't have that support team, you're never going to achieve. And on Health versus Wealth, the whole principle is protect your health to enjoy your wealth. If you don't invest in the support team, you're actually, bits are going to fall off the plane. You're trying to fly at light speed, okay? But you haven't got a ground crew, you haven't got a map, your airplane isn't having any servicing, and you're lucky if you touch ground to refuel. Now, if you were flying in that plane, you wouldn't feel confident about the longevity of that airplane. Something's going to fall off the machine, especially if you're driving it hard and fast. So the whole concept is you need this support around you. And actually in Britain, I feel like the younger people are getting that through. Sometimes almost a bit too much, but I think they've got to balance that out. But there's a big backlash there to say, look, I don't want to be a workaholic like I see people doing. I want to be sustainable. I'm going to do this in a sustainable way, an enjoyable way. And there's something about backing yourself. I think if you don't have the fear and you have the confidence, you put in the good stuff at the beginning and you take the long view. Now, I'll give you an example. When I came to Birmingham, I didn't have any money. I was backing myself. I totally funded my own business. I had a bit of savings to sort of somehow survive with my family. What's the first thing I did? I employed a PA. So I wasn't paying myself, I was paying the PA because I knew that would increase my productivity. And that really paid off because 6 years later, we've got a multi-million-pound business and I'm now able to pay myself properly. But actually, you've got to go through that squeeze and back yourself and trust that if you invest in the right support, you'll get the right outcome.
And so talking about protecting your wealth because of your health, so those people who come sitting in front of you who clearly have an issue, wealthy people, but not well in terms of health, is that because of they got their work-life balance wrong? So in other words, they placed more emphasis on the work than the life. Is that where it goes wrong? Is that where you try and unravel and then you go into, or is it, I don't know, is it just they just never think about their health and think, actually I'm doing all right, but health to sort itself out? Is it a balance problem?
I think there is a balance problem. I think there's a mindset problem as well. A lot of young entrepreneurs think they're indestructible, which is why they go, I can survive on 4 hours, And you can do that for a time. What you can't do is that forever. And by the time you're hitting your mid-30s or 40s, that will have dire consequences. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, our typical, we have like 15 members of staff, we have female doctors, psychologists, nutritionists and a breath coach, all part of the team, because basically that's the full gamut that you need to support someone. But the typical client is someone who's either going, I'm a successful entrepreneur in my 20s, 30s, I want to protect myself so that I can enjoy my full life and arrive alive. And the other typical client is like, I'm mid-40s, I haven't looked after myself at all, something's gone wrong, I need to sort this out. I've got overweight. I need to do something about that, for example. So I think sometimes people just haven't paid attention to their health, or sometimes people try to do too much, too fast, too soon. And I was a victim of that, right? Because at one point I was running this company. I was working part-time as a medical director of 14 prisons. I was writing for a publication. I had a family of 3 children, and I was trying to have a life, and that's just not compatible. You've got to actually make some tough choices, back yourself and go for the thing that you think you really want to do. But a lot of us are held back by fear. So the mindset is key, which is why I have the organisational business psychologist there to go, what do you really want? I really wanted to actually have control over my life. There's autonomy that I valued, but what it's given me is everything else as well.
So it's education, because you're right, a lot of people regret it later. And a lot of people die earlier than they should do. Now, again, I know you suffered from cancer, and I'm going to get sort of tight for time, but cancer, I remember sitting next to a cancer specialist, and he said a number of things. I said, why do we get cancer? And he said, diet. But he actually said, picking your point up, is actually stress.
Yeah, it's a big cause.
And stress pushes cancer. And you wonder, is that why more people now get cancer in the Western world? Because actually we're increasingly more stressed. And to what extent is that self-imposed, where we put ourselves under more pressure than we should? And you're right, the mobile phone doesn't help, because we're on there all the time, we're responding to calls. And so again, that brings you back to life-work balance.
It does. My answer to that is that obesity is one of the biggest causes of cancer, way higher than smoking.
Okay.
Increases your risk way higher than anything else. So 60% of Americans are obese, getting on for similar stats in this country now with a Western diet, which is a poor diet, and the stress that drives that. So to be honest, I think stress is a big factor. When I had cancer, I was actually made redundant from a GP job. The practice had run out of money doing a development, and they told me 3 months after having my first child, my wife on statutory maternity pay, having to pay a mortgage, they go, "I'm really sorry, we're going to let you go." And I was like, "What? I'm a GP. You're telling me I'm going redundant?"
Nobody tells a GP to
and
go
I was
home.
so shocked. Within a week, I had this weird lesion pop up on my leg, this mole, black mole thing, started growing a nasty black bit, and I was like, I don't like the look of that. I'd just been on a conference about melanoma the week before, and I diagnosed my own melanoma, and it turned out to be a nasty invasive cancer. Now, that was directly related to stress, because I was thinking, I can't provide for my family, I'm going to lose my house. Because the stress causes the high cortisol, which suppresses your immune surveillance, and immune surveillance is a system that mops up cancer. We're having cancer all the time, Linda. Our bodies protect us from it, but if you switch off that system with stress, boom, the cancer goes off.
Right, we've not got much time, but you've got me on going on something about stress. So, okay, so I'm sitting in front of you. I'm in real trouble. My health's not great.
Yeah.
I know I'm not great. I'm highly stressed. I don't sleep much. So what would be your first bit of advice for me to de-stress? So how can you say to me, reduce the stress? And I'll say, "Do you know, there's bailiffs knocking on my door, there's people chasing me for payment, I haven't got this product out on time, already, my stuff aren't going..." So,
first of all, I'd ask you what you want.
Okay.
What do you want? Do you want to be in the situation you're in, or do you want to make a change? Because if you don't want to make a change, I can't work with you. No point in even bothering. So you can leave now if you don't want to change something. I can't fix this for you, but I can help you as your co-pilot on that journey to better health. All right. So if you say, "Yes, I want to change, I can't cope with this anymore," I'll go, "You are the accumulation of the small habits that you do regularly. So let's look at some things that we can change. Very simple things. Getting enough sleep. Let's think about light exercise. If you're not exercising at all, let's introduce some brisk walking." Okay.
Keep going. I've got a question to ask you about that.
And then let's look at dealing with your mental state. I've got in front of me my journal. Every day I write down affirmations. I write down gratitude for something that I'm grateful for, and that really helps.
Where'd you find the time?
You make the time. So the question,
okay.
The man in front of me, why is he so stressed? He's not making the time to maintain himself. So if you're an airplane, you have to spend time getting maintained. Yeah? Go and check the tyre pressures, get the oil pressure checked, check the instruments, check the batteries, blah, blah, blah. The same applies. I put in an hour every day into self-maintenance, and I believe that's why I have achieved the things that I've achieved. Because if you don't do that, it's not going to be sustainable.
Describe that 1 hour. What do you do in that 1 hour?
So I wake up, I meditate.
In the morning? In the morning?
Yep. At the moment, I'm not part of the 5 a.m. club because I've got other priorities, but I used to be 6 a.m. club.
Okay.
I do a meditation, I pray, I then write down some affirmations about who I want to be and who I am, who I believe I should be. I then do some yoga or some stretching. I then sometimes do a cold plunge if I've got my cold plunge going. And cold plunge, cold water tank.
Yep, I just want to check that I have the right definition.
Or a cold shower.
Yeah.
That really wakes you up.
Oh, I'm sure that really wakes you up.
I also might do, included in that, I might do a half-hour brisk walk at lunchtime, or I might do a run, or I might do some exercises for maintenance. And at the end of the day, I try and spend 15 minutes doing an evening. How did that day go? How am I doing? What did I achieve? What didn't I achieve? And why? How am I going to change tomorrow?
Could you? I wish we would book more time for this, but
we should do another one.
Is there a possibility that at the end of the evening, people, certainly high achievers, will actually only think about the things that went wrong?
Absolutely. You've got to write down the things that went well.
This was terrible, didn't do that, didn't do this, didn't do that, didn't do that. Oh my God.
That's just negative self-talk, right? I was quite badly bullied at school, so I had to develop a really thick skin with positive self-talk, and I came out of school bizarrely with an incredibly optimistic outlook, because I was just like, stuff you guys, you don't know who I am. Actually, I'm choosing to be this. And so I write down stuff in it every day. There's books here. I am excited about this. What will I do to feel happy today? How will I improve tomorrow? If you ask yourself these questions, your brain, your subconscious will come up with the answers, and I guarantee it will work better, because it's a constant state of improvement.
You talk about brisk walking.
Yeah.
I walk 10,000 steps a day, only because somebody said 10,000 was right.
It's
but,
a good...
but is that an arbitrary? Is that me just picking an arbitrary figure because I've heard other people? Is there?
You might want. So if you had bad knees, you might want to swim.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be just steps, but weight-bearing exercise is good. Okay. So that helps your bones and joints, stay strong. I think brisk walking is one of the easiest, most accessible forms of exercise. Well, how long can you manage? I mean, it's not about the minimum. It's about what can you do. You don't want to be doing the absolute basic. If you can afford yourself an hour-long walk in the sunshine on a sunny day, do that. Get a dog, because it forces you to go out walking.
Yeah, a friend of mine. In fact, a friend of mine's got really fit, because every evening when he rings me, he's walking with his dog. Yeah,
or if you can't do that, get a treadmill, put it under your desk, get a standing desk, and spend 2 hours walking while you are talking to people on calls, doing your work.
2 last questions. 3 very quick ones. 1 very quick one, 2 reasonably good ones. Coffee, yes or no?
Depends. If you're overstimulated, no, because coffee rises cortisol. What you should do is wake up naturally in the morning rather than drink coffee to wake up, because natural cortisol is actually produced by your body. Coffee spikes your cortisol. So the evidence is that coffee is beneficial, 2 to 3 cups of it per day.
Is that coffee or tea, or are you?
It's actually coffee, because it's got antioxidants in it, which are beneficial.
I don't drink coffee.
Anti-cancer,
I only drink tea.
Can be beneficial. Black tea has some similar antioxidant properties, but it's more sort of bladder irritant. And tea is just as strong in caffeine as coffee. The key thing a lot of entrepreneurs do is drink too much coffee after midday and then can't sleep. So my advice is don't drink caffeine after midday.
Alcohol. Bad, good?
In moderation. There's nothing wrong with a good glass of red wine, for example. It's got resveratrol in it, which reduces heart disease. However, an excess of anything is going to give you problems. Alcohol's inflammatory, so I wouldn't recommend investing in lots of alcohol as a success strategy.
Now, I started, then I heard that I was wrong. Lemon in the morning, yes or no?
So, stomach acid is really important to maintain. If you have a low pH in your stomach, lots of acidity, you can digest food better, you can actually get more minerals and vitamins out of that food. So actually, lemon in the morning can be helpful, unless you're having an excess of acid production, in which case you don't want to be producing more acid, you want to deal with the cause of the acid production, which might be stress.
Bad for your teeth?
You should always clean your teeth, because acids like that can strip the enamel. So
lemon first, then brush your teeth?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. Right. Okay. 2 last questions. One maybe longer than the other. NHS. You got out because you thought it wasn't doing its job. Is it doing its job, or are we doomed for it never to do its job because of the ageing problem?
Great question.
Modern ways of eating, obesity you've just mentioned, all of that. And it's demanding so much money now, and then we have the defence budget's going to go up, something's going to... Is it doomed, or can we do something?
I think doomed is a strong word that people love to use, but in reality, the NHS was never designed to do what it's trying to do now. It was never funded adequately to do what it's trying to do now, and so it's sadly overwhelmed. We've got the population of Denmark on waiting lists, and unfortunately that means that everything is slowing down. There's not enough resources going in there to deliver what people need. Expectations have changed, cost, technology has changed, health has deteriorated rather than increasing. When the NHS was first started, it was designed to prevent serious illness or acute illness and save lives. It wasn't designed to manage chronic disease, which is what we've got now from a poor lifestyle. So in reality, it was never designed to do what it's trying to do now, and it's failing because it's not invested enough in the doctors, the nurses, the hospitals, the research. We used to have some of the best cancer stats in the world, and certainly in Europe. We're now worse than a lot of old ex-Eastern European countries like Poland. So basically, we're unfortunately not investing enough, and we have to make a choice to pay more tax and invest in that, or individuals need to take ownership of their health and invest in private health, which is probably easier than lobbying Parliament.
We won't go discussing this, but I think education's got a lot to do with it.
Huge,
and I think
huge. In schools.
In schools,
why
correct.
are we not teaching good quality
Correct.
diet in school and exercise?
Correct. Right, a couple of things then. Your future plans, and my last question, I think you've answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What are your future plans as an entrepreneur, and what does success look like for you?
Ooh, great question. I'm going to answer the success question first.
Go on.
I have this mantra that I say to myself every morning. I am the well-balanced founder of an international network of therapeutic integrated health clinics. Okay, and that's the first part. The reason for that is that's who I want to be. That's who I want to become, and it's got to be international because I feel like I need a bigger reach than just England. And since I've started saying that, I have ended up with an international reach, which is amazing. And that became a thing because of long COVID, which I've become an expert in, bizarrely, because I had it myself.
That's right.
Now, so what does success look like? It looks like, for me, that balance where you have enough money, you enjoy your life, you live your life to the full every day, and you feel like you are doing the thing that you are supposed to do. And that carries on day after day. That's what success is like on a daily basis, that you are contented, that you feel like your relationships are in balance, and that you feel like you're resonating with your values. For me, that's a faith-based thing. I do believe that I have a real calling to be a doctor to help people. And I'm loving the fact that I'm able to deliver that, and it's working. And that's great.
And it's just that your advice for new aspiring entrepreneurs is, you've
got to find your thing. You've got to find your thing. What is the thing that you are most passionate about? And forget the fears that you have about trying to achieve it. Do a Richard Branson and just say yes and work out how to do it later. Because that's all I've done. People say, how did you set up a practice that's now national? I just started solving problems one at a time, and I was willing to do that. That's all I've done.
Well, one of the quotes you said was, what do you want in life, when you ask those people? So future plans, great. Internationalization, success, I've got that. So just a couple of things I want to summarize with. Fascinating. It is about habits. It's about protecting your wealth through your health. We talked about sleep. We've talked about diet. We've talked about super nap, the power nap. Yeah. We've talked about the role of mobile phones. We've talked about understanding a balance and reflecting during the day that might de-stress what you're doing.
Yeah.
I loved your one word, maintain yourself. So we carry out yearly MOTs on our cars, but we don't do an MOT on ourselves. I think we're very quick to take the car into a garage, but we won't go knocking on a doctor's door. We'll just say it'll sort itself out. People are so focused on productivity, and I mean by productivity in the sense that they think every hour works for you, and they don't understand that actually a reflective sort of comment would work better for you. I think you made some great comments about the type of sleep, and what was really interesting was understanding what you want from life. That will then allow you to understand the balance. I agree. I've been there. I was in my 20s and 30s. I thought I was indestructible. We all did. And we all thought, well, that's fine. Interesting that as a child when I was growing up, I never heard the word cancer. But now we've just worked out cancer's down to stress and diet and all these things we never think about. Things that have been created by mankind, the Western society, not by nature. This is our fault. We spoke about the NHS. Yeah, maybe it's become a beast that's far too big, but amazing how the NHS could function if we functioned properly.
It could.
And if we did our own job, and you said that earlier, whilst we need a support system around us, the NHS being one such beast, but you know something, if we could do some of the stuff ourselves, which is what entrepreneurs do,
take responsibility,
I think we'd all be in a better place. I think the government would be in a better place, the country would be in a better place. I think as individuals we'd be in a better place. And if you're an entrepreneur, you could achieve much, much more.
Yeah, you're so right.
Mr. Ben, this has been wonderful. I wish we had more time. I had lots more questions, but this has been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you the very best on your entrepreneurial journey, which has already been successful. And as you said, you're working at a brisk pace, and I'm sure you get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Cheers.
Thank you.